Well, thank you so much for being here. Every one of you, and especially the young people, but especially the people who are here who have been active in the movement for so long and have given your hearts to and your lives in so many ways, so many sacrifices to exactly what the theme of the March for Life this year is, that love saves lives. So many of you can tell stories about what that means. I'm so delighted to have with me here on our panel 3 people who can witness to and embody in many ways this theme of the March for Life this year, Love Saves Lives. Every year, this is probably, I think this is my 5th or so year moderating this panel at the March for Life Expo, and I love doing it because at the heart of the March for Life every year are 2 things. The young people, I just was at Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral, and it was packed with students who just came off buses from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Now, I'm sorry, that has to be a miserable bus ride, you know? But they're joyful and they're happy, and they're gonna be here for the next 30 hours or so. And whatever you do, if you're on social media or if you have Facebook pages or you're emailing people back home, show some of these faces of joy, of people who have made sacrifices to be here, because that's at the heart of it, this March for Life. And so also at the heart of the March for Life is the work that Kelly Rosati and Moira Gaul and Tim Saccoccia. So I asked Tim how to say his last name, and I've known Tim for years, but I've never, addressed him by his last name. And he said,
I said it's Saccoccia, like the bread.
And I said that bread is way too fancy for me. I'm just going to call you Tim Bread. So there we are. Now I'm not going to read the long bios because you have most of the bios in the program. Kelly Rosati, the important thing to know about her is that her heart is foster care, and so she's going to talk a little bit about foster care as an issue, as a movement, as part of her personal life, as a foster mom herself. Moira Gaul is at the Charlotte Lozier Instiute, which was established a number of years ago to really be a fact-finding treasure for the pro-life movement, for research, and really helping people understand what the pro-life movement is. It's more than a protest at the Supreme Court once a year. It's a daily story of love. And so what does that look like? What are crisis pregnancy centers exactly? What do they look like? What do they do? So often we talk about defunding Planned Parenthood, and people in the Knights of Columbus, which we'll get to in a moment, have been commissioning this Marist polling for over a decade now, which is so heartening to know that so many Americans who describe themselves as pro-choice, it's not because they wake up in the morning thinking about abortion, motivated by making sure abortion is legal. It's because they want to know that a woman in a difficult situation has options. Well, she does have options, and so that's some of what we're going to talk about today, what that looks like. And so thank you, Tim and the Knights of Columbus, for the ultrasound initiative that you've worked on. In addition to this polling, the Knights of Columbus, I cannot speak well enough of for some of the things that they've been doing in the last couple of years to save lives here at home and abroad. So anyhow, with that, we're going to start with Moira to talk a little bit about crisis pregnancy centers and that love story, what that looks like.
Well, thank you, Kathryn, Jean, and good morning. It's wonderful to be with you. Again, my name's Moira Gaul. I'm with the Charlotte Lozier Institute, and it's been a joy to be both involved with pregnancy center ministry and then now to study it. So what are pregnancy help centers? I know that many of you here in the room are likely very familiar with their outreach, and some of you may volunteer or be a pregnancy center worker, which is fantastic, but I'm hoping that over the next 10 minutes and during the panel that you might learn something new about their outreach. So next slide. In a nutshell, pregnancy help centers provide support services, medical care, and resources, needed resources to women facing difficult or challenging pregnancies to assist them both with their immediate and ongoing needs. And care is provided within a respectful and compassionate environment, all to empower her to welcome her child into the world. Centers don't refer or provide abortion. There are also community-based and faith-based organizations that are found in virtually every type of community in the country: rural, suburban, urban, college settings, and more. Next slide. So the next question is, what do they do? And they provide vital, highly valued services to vulnerable youth and women on a free or low-cost basis. And these include pregnancy testing, which has been offered for over 40 years now, medical services, ultrasound, medical exams, STD testing, prenatal care, and more. And with ultrasound, we know that provides confirmation of a viable pregnancy, but it's also the remarkable technology that gives us a window to the womb to see clearly shine light on lives in their earliest stages there. And we're going to be hearing a lot more about that from the other panelists. STD testing and treatment, these are more recent services that have been a response to a public health need to both protect current and future reproductive health. Education on all options. This includes abortion, adoption, and parenting. These are the three options a woman has. And all info is provided with a client's permission. Next, prenatal development education. And this includes topics on different levels of development of a baby in utero, as well as changes a woman can expect and ways to care for herself. Things like nutrition, exercise, coping, and early bonding with her baby. Next slide. Next, parenting education and classes. In 2010, nearly 80% of pregnancy help centers were offering this important outreach, either on-site or at nearby churches. Parenting education helps to prepare moms and dads, if they're invited, to help prepare them to be parents, and they cover a wide range of issues: child development, injury prevention, family rules, anger management, positive discipline, life skills too, and finance management. Next is sexual risk avoidance or abstinence education. And this information and education is designed to provide a roadmap to practicing the behavior. It's also a form of primary prevention. Medically referenced information is offered to clients concerning the risks of casual sex, adolescent sex, multiple partners, and other high-risk behaviors. And it's also sex positive. And centers provide this either in individual sessions or as group presentations in the community or on-site. Material assistance, nearly all centers provide some form of material assistance, either during pregnancy or afterwards, and this can involve maternity, baby clothing, furniture, diapers, pack and plays, all sorts of different things that community members often donate. So after abortion support, the mental health after effects of abortion are significant and can be experienced years, even decades following an abortion. And care for clients includes one-on-one meetings as well as group meetings, and some centers even provide outreach to men and family members who can be affected by abortion. And in 2010, 75% of centers offered abortion support recovery. Last, referrals to critical and needed community health care and support services. These are vital linkages which promote positive outcomes for women, for moms, and for children. And they include a whole range of things like addiction and recovery support, housing, breastfeeding classes, referrals to WIC, job centers, and skills trainings. And centers have really become an integral part of community care networks because they're trusted partners in their communities to care for women. So with center services and these these referrals, these equate to resources for women, which they really need in challenging and difficult situations. So, next slide. So we know that women learn about centers in their communities by word of mouth from national polls conducted in both 1997 and in 2014. In 2014, it was by Charlotte Lozier Institute. We found that they, in both cases, learned the highest cited response was word of mouth. And that even beat out the internet in 2014, which is very interesting. So, and we also know from exit surveys at the center level that there's consistently high satisfaction reported. Someone sent me a client quote yesterday saying, "I don't think I would have survived this pregnancy without your love and support." So there's something that pregnancy centers, that women experience there, where they feel cared for and loved. And I think that the volunteer training has something to do with this. While there are various excellent trainings, there are universal elements in all of them. And one I decided to quickly share with you that I used to teach, and it's easy to remember, is qualities of an effective helper. And what are they? They're huge. And H stands for humility, U, unconditional love, G, genuineness, and E, empathy. And I don't have time to go into all of these, although I would love to with you today. But they're qualities that are essential for volunteers to develop, to become effective lay counselors, peer counselors, and educators. Next slide. So what's the impact? In 2011, a professional statistician collected and analyzed national data and took into account cost estimates for all of the pregnancy center services offered and hourly wages for social workers. And she calculated in 2010 that PHCs served more than 2 million people with an estimated community cost savings of more than $100 million. So this is important analysis to measure what PRCs offer in savings. And we at the Charlotte Lozier Institute have just begun a third national report where we're going to look at this. Some of the preliminary data very quickly. There are an estimated 2,752 center locations. This includes 100 mobile units rolling on the road. 6 in 10 centers offer free ultrasounds. Next slide. 248,832 free ultrasounds were performed in 2016. And the life-saving decisions which followed some of these scans resulted in children who are alive today. And that's of immeasurable impact. And others will be speaking to that in the panel. 577 locations offered STD testing, and 400 offer STD treatment. This is up from 260 in 2010. 30,000 calls per month to Heartbeat International's option line. 81,600 million volunteers. 9 in 10 pregnancy center workers are volunteers. They're a powerhouse. And 6.5 million volunteer hours calculated. And again, as mentioned, very high client satisfaction. Next slide. Who values pregnancy center outreach? We see that both state and local governments do. In at least 18 states, state health departments refer. And then in 18 states, there have been actual state-level resolutions honoring their tremendous contributions. And at least 90% of the funding pregnancy centers raise is done locally at the community level, and 80% receive no public monies. And so all of this, we see efforts to attack both the good work and the goodwill of centers. Next slide. I'm very quickly going to mention the United States Supreme Court is currently hearing a case about a 2015 California law dubbed the Reproductive Fact Act, which forces pro-life pregnancy centers to display or distribute information, including a phone number, on how women can obtain a free or low-cost abortion. So it's mandating them to do this, to advertise for abortion or incur monetary penalties. And the name of the case is NIFLA, National Institute of Family and Life Advocates versus Becerra. And the Charlotte Lozier Institute filed a friend of the court brief just 2 days ago for this case. The similar laws have been struck down in Maryland, New York, and Texas at the federal court level. So this is a critically important case. We want you to know about it. And it also, striking down this law can uphold broad free speech protections. And we've created a fact sheet for you here today, which I believe is on the volunteer table or is going to be passed out with much of the information I've spoken about. So we hope that you will find that helpful. The last slide, just to mention again, the pregnancy centers are just a shining example of how love saves lives.
Thank you so much, Moira. I was reminded as you were talking of this beautiful grandmother, Eleanor McCullon, who was a plaintiff in a Massachusetts buffer zone case a couple of Januaries ago here in Washington. But the important thing to know about her is she stands in front of Planned Parenthood in Boston every Wednesday, and she says sometimes all a woman needs is for someone to say good morning, smile, can I help you? And that can change everything. And sometimes she's so desperately looking for that. And the work that the crisis pregnancy centers do is just so crucial. And thank you for telling us a little bit about that. And thank you for your own witness in working in that ministry. Tim, can you talk a little bit about what the Knights of Columbus have been doing to build this civilization of love, as Carl Anderson, your boss, likes to talk about it, and how ultrasound is part of that picture?
Sure. Well, thanks, Kathryn, Jean. Thanks, Moira and Kelly as well. Just before I start and before I go into too much depth, even though I see some brother knights in the crowd and families. Well, maybe I don't need to say who the Knights of Columbus are then. But for those of you who might not know, the Knights of Columbus is the world's largest Catholic lay family organization. We have 1.3 million members here in the United States, and about almost 2 million members when you encompass the rest of the world. And our mission, I think is fair to say, is very simple. It's to live our shared Catholic faith and to serve our communities. So our commitment to supporting the pro-life movement, though, dates back decades. And some people sometimes ask, what gets the Knights of Columbus so involved in pro-life work? And of course, it's certainly from our shared Catholic faith and recognizing the Church's teaching on life. But it really dates back also decades, right after Roe v. Wade in 1974, when Nellie Gray gathered people around her kitchen table to start planning the first March for Life. Those who were with her were mostly Knights of Columbus families, mostly from New York. And so we've been here at the March for all 45 years, and it's so good to see so many of you here. But like I said, our support of the pro-life movement comes not just out of our commitment to Catholic teachings on the beginning of life, but it truly stems from our first foundational principle of charity. Our charitable mission, I think, manifests itself in many ways. In fact, when non-members tell me that they've heard of the Knights of Columbus, they almost always proceed to tell me about some project in their community or a pancake breakfast. But usually it's a charitable program that they were involved with or helped something that they work with or at their parish or what have you. But I think our pro-life work is very much an important component of our charitable mission. After all, our theme for this year at the March is Love Saves Lives. And the very root of the English word charitable is the Latin word caritas, which in many ways is love. So broadly speaking, I think there are two ways that the Knights of Columbus members and our councils support the work of the pro-life movement, especially in the way we've been talking about, and to supplement what Moira talked about with pregnancy care centers. And I think the first is very simple, and it's very Knights of Columbus, and it's that our councils and our members support pro-life pregnancy care centers almost universally. Many Knights are volunteers at local centers or homes in their neighborhoods or communities, and many also even serve on the boards of some of these centers as well. But how they do it is different in every council, which is one of the great things about being a Knight, is that you answer the call and the need in your local community or at your local pregnancy care center. And our councils, in fact, my brother Knights will know this, but maybe others won't, is that every council in the Knights of Columbus, approaching 16,000 local councils, are encouraged to do 4 pro-life activities every year. So if you think about I'm not really good at math, but that's a lot. now, what ways do some of these manifest themselves? Well, we heard the applause. In a lot of ways, it's organizing groups in their parishes or communities to come to the March for Life every year. Or if this is far, maybe that Baton Rouge group doesn't think so, but if this is far, then maybe it's in your local state capital or local major city where there's another pro-life march. But I would say for a close second is support of those local pregnancy care centers. And when I think about that, when I was preparing for today, one story came to mind. We had a local college council here in the area who for years, and they still do as far as I know, they would get up early on a Saturday morning. If you can imagine, in college I didn't want to get up early on a Saturday morning, but these guys get up early on a Saturday morning, and they went to a local grocery store and they stood at the entrance. And when people came in, they passed out a flyer or a pamphlet, or they talked about the local pregnancy care center in their community. And they said how much they needed, some assistance and some help if those people had any opportunity to help them out. And what would usually happen is then they had guys at the exit, and they were there to collect the diapers and the gift cards and the non-perishable foods that they brought out after that, and then they brought it over to the center later in that day. And this is just, I think, a great example of something that the Knights of Columbus, that Knights of Columbus councils do, and that my brother Knights are proud to do, and maybe many of you have done as well. But our second maybe major area of pro-life work, if I'm going to put them into two buckets, is our ultrasound initiative, something that some of you may have heard of, some of you may have not. And I think it's a very straightforward program. Essentially, a local council is asked to identify a pregnancy care center that can use an ultrasound, and that it obviously doesn't have one or needs a new one. Then they do fundraising. Maybe it's those pancake breakfasts that you've been to or people talk about, or maybe it's some other unique fundraising vehicle to raise that money for an ultrasound, when we're talking something probably in the range of $30,000, give or take. For something like that. So we're talking about councils raising $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 on their own. And once they hit that threshold, our national office will kick in the other half. And since 2009, when we started this program, we've placed over about 900 ultrasound machines in pregnancy care centers now in all 50 states, and a couple of Canadian provinces as well. And by June, I think, the Knights here in the District of Columbia will place the first ultrasound machine here in Washington as well. And the funding for that matching is something that we do all together as Brother Knights from the Knights of Columbus Culture of Life Fund, which is something that all our councils and members contribute to. So when we're bringing in that extra $15,000 or $12,000, what have you, it's a national and international effort, in fact. This past August, our Supreme Knight, Carl Anderson, who Kathryn Jean was mentioning before, he announced a drive to reach 1,000 machines by the time that this program turns 10 years old next year in 2019. And I think we're really on our way to that. What we like to refer to, and many of you, of course, we don't hold a monopoly on this phrase, but the windows to the womb are, I think, our leading expectant mothers who are weighing their options to choose life for the child increasingly as we go forward. And if we reach 1,000 machines and we think about, we don't know necessarily how many mothers might decide to choose life when they see their unborn child in the womb, but if we consider that it's maybe 2 every week, if we place 1,000 machines, we're talking about saving over 100,000 lives over the course of a year. So I think it's a very worthy effort, but not just on that side, but very briefly to also say, to Moira's point, on the medical services offered by these centers as well. If you have a center that's relying totally on donations, being able to give an ultrasound machine really can help support their prenatal medical care and the services that they provide in that vein as well. And we consider that an equally and very important part of the process as well, so that these mothers who may not have access to health care or to certain means can get that from these centers who are helping women in their community every day. So we're very proud of our work on this, and very happy to be here today and talking a bit more about it.
Thank you, Tim. When Moira was talking earlier, I was thinking of a phrase called radical hospitality that you hear people in crisis pregnancy centers talk about a lot. My friend Carter Sneed at Notre Dame talks about it a lot. But it is so especially embodied, Kelly, in when we start talking about adoption, in the beautiful mothers who are pregnant and start thinking about adoption, and that incredible heroic sacrifice that involves, sacrifice of love. and the radical hospitality that leads families to think, maybe I have room for one more child, because there are so many children who need a temporary home and certainly need a permanent home. So can you talk to us, Kelly, a little bit about adoption and foster care and how that's a piece of all of this?
I would love to talk about that. Good morning, everybody. Before I do, I just want to put a little bit of a bow on the topic of pregnancy medical clinics and pregnancy resource centers, thanking both of you for all the work that is done from your organizations. I'm with Focus on the Family out in Colorado Springs, Colorado, and we actually have an ultrasound program as well. Thank you for that. Focus loves y'all. And the mission of Focus on the Family is to simply help families thrive in Christ. And the sanctity and dignity of every human life is a core of what we do. I'm also so honored to be a part of the National March for Life Board of Directors and to work with so many great people, and it's just an honor to be here. So let me say that. I just am so thrilled to get to be with all of you. Focus on the Family also started an ultrasound program back in 2004, and I'm not going to give you all the details of it, simply to add to what has been said here. When we started the program, we said we want to gather data so that we can know empirically what we think we know intuitively, which is that these machines, and we also do grants for sonography training, that these things are going to save lives. So we have made a condition of the grant going way back that we collect data from the pregnancy centers, and it is tabulated and it is made rigorous by an external third-party collector. And what we know, this is the news flash, is that since that time, more than 400,000 babies have been saved from abortion. And so that's just an encouragement to all of us who really have made a commitment and a prioritization to the work of pregnancy medical clinics and resource centers on the ground. So thank you to both of you for that. Kathryn Jean mentioned that I get really fired up about foster care and adoption. One of the things I think that I love most about this year's theme, Love Saves Lives. I told Jeannie I just think this should be our forever theme at the March for Life because I love it so much. And it's what's represented in everything that is Catholic social teaching, and it's the dignity of every human person. I'm going to have them throw up a picture to show you why I am especially passionate about that. Okay, I want the women in the room to go, "Aw, come on, thank you, thank you." My husband and I were blessed almost 18 years ago to start the journey of foster care adoption. And here's how it happened. It happened because we were passionate about the sanctity and dignity of human life. We'd been involved in the pro-life movement forever. And in fact, I'm a lawyer and a lobbyist, and I was in the process of asking somebody who was in the adoption world, what kind of laws do you need changed? What can I do to help you make adoption more effective in our state? She never really answered the question for me, but she instead told me that there were hundreds of modern-day orphans in my own community who needed families. Can you believe that? I had no idea. And I kind of thought I was reasonably, not incredibly, but reasonably smart person. And she's given me this information that is blowing my mind, that down the street from where I live is a child made in the image and likeness of Almighty God who goes to bed alone in a temporary foster home and prays to God that somebody might come for him or her. And we were gripped. Honestly, we'd never really thought that much about it. But the question hit us, if not us, who will welcome in these kids? If it's not people committed to the dignity and sanctity of every human life, if it's not people who say, let that child be born, if we're not willing to let them come in with us, what's going to happen to us? So anyway, that's how our journey started. It started because we're pro-life. And in our family, there's the picture still. In our family, we are Korean, Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, Vietnamese, Micronesian, Italian, and Irish. That's cool, right? And but I also have to tell you that one of the things we've learned through this experience is that the love that saves lives is not soft sentimentality. It can often be a very, very difficult journey. See, when kids are in foster care or they come from orphanages overseas, they've often experienced incredible trauma. And what we know now from from neurological science is that the trauma changes the brain. When children are exposed in utero to drugs and alcohol, when they have known only neglect and deprivation in their young years, their brain is changed. And it takes a different kind of parenting in order to help them heal and come to a place where they are able to be all that God has intended for them to be. One of the things that I think the pro-choice community likes to do is talk about, well, what about all of the hard decisions? What about the hard choices? And I've been with people who have said, what about that child who was born to a drug-addicted teenage mother and who's going to go through withdrawal and shakes and feel tortured when they're little kids, when they're little babies because of what was done? Surely abortion would be better. And to that person, I can just say, let me introduce you to my son, Daniel, the tall one in that picture with the red shirt. See, Daniel was born addicted to crystal methamphetamine. He's given me permission to talk about this, by the way. He says, Mom, if it can help somebody else choose life or help somebody else, you can say it. And the doctors told us, oh, it's not going to be easy with him. And the reality is that it hasn't been easy. 2 of my kids' birth mothers have schizophrenia. I don't know if any of you have had experience with living with people with mental illness, loving people with mental illness, or maybe with mental illness yourself. It's one of life's toughest challenges. But God is there through every bit of it. And as I have learned and come to love the phrase from some of my Catholic friends about what he does in our interior life, he does in the midst of some of that hardship. One of my kids was actually born on the streets of a major metropolitan city because her birth mother had schizophrenia and was alone. She had no prenatal care. And her poor birth mama, can you imagine the fear and that cortisol bath that entered into my daughter's brain? And it makes life hard. And it has made life hard. But love has saved her life. And we are so grateful in our family for our children's birth moms who chose life in the most difficult of circumstances. What about a woman who comes to this country and doesn't speak English and is in an abusive situation and she finds herself pregnant? Surely abortion would be the better choice. I'd like to introduce you to my other son, the one we tease up there about those dark sunglasses. They're actually regular glasses. You know, they get dark when you're outside like that. See, he came home to us. We were his 6th home. And he'd been through more grief and trauma. He'd been homeless. And life had been really, really difficult. And when he came home at age 4, he only had 2 words. One of them was no, which we quickly turned into no thank you. And one of them was bugs, and he still likes the outdoors. See, the world says, of course, abortion would have been the better option. This kid is so fantastic. I can't even tell you. And he's now 15 years old. And so love truly does save lives, and I'll end with this. There are 100,000 modern-day orphans in the United States of America. They're trapped in foster care. They're mostly invisible. You don't see them on the corner at St. John's Orphanage or another good place like that used to exist, but they have become invisible. You see, these 100,000 kids are the ones that people say their lives would have been better off had they not been born. And we have to be the people who can say unequivocally, not only with our mouths that is not true, but with our lives and our hands and our feet and our love, that is not true. These 100,000 kids are kids today that most people call unadoptable. We categorically reject that label. These are kids made in the image and likeness of God, who bear the imprint, the imago Dei, and he has a plan for their lives, but they need families. They're teenagers, sibling groups, and kids with special needs. And it isn't at all about whether we're interested in adopting them. It's about us being willing to ask God, do you want to use the blessing of our family on behalf of a child without one? That's the question. And with more than 300,000 churches in the United States of America and 100,000 kids, I'm not good at math either, but we can all figure that out. One child welcomed into every third church, folks, and we have no more modern-day orphans in the United States of America. And that is the vision and the goal and the dream about how love can save lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you to the baby who started cooing at the exact moment you started talking about children being made in the image and likeness of God. It sounded like a little voice from heaven, just accentuating the point. We don't have a lot of time, so I just want to go back to each one of you. We're all here in Washington because we want to see the country look different, be more welcoming to every child and mother, help families flourish. Moira, if you tell us very quickly what drew you to the Ministry of Crisis Pregnancy Centers in the first place, and answer the question, what more can we do as we walk away from Washington tomorrow or go back to where we came from to help the Crisis Pregnancy Center maybe we don't even know about down the street?
Sure. I don't think I've ever been asked that, at least publicly, before. It's interesting. So really, my being drawn into pregnancy center ministry, everyone's story is different, but one of the biggest factors was I was on a vacation once early in college, actually mid-college, overseas, and attended a family party with guests. And during the course of the party, a woman there was terribly upset and spoke with me about having an abortion. And she was just inconsolable, just some of the gut-wrenching pain that she was going through. And so that made a real imprint on me. And it wasn't, until maybe 5 years later that I interviewed for the pregnancy center position, and just that resonated in my heart, and the needs for abortion outreach to women, and for sharing about the sanctity of life prior to them making a decision, just the information that they need to have. So in terms of things that you can do, you can speak up about the good work of pregnancy centers. It's so funny because I've heard the crisis pregnancy centers, pregnancy care centers, pregnancy resource centers, pregnancy help centers I use today. So we all know what we're talking about, right? Pro-life pregnancy centers. And sometimes when you speak with different groups of people, either legislators, friends, family, church members, just make sure that you're all on the same page with what you're talking about. They are the pro-life pregnancy centers. They're ministries. So, and just to say these are centers that are here to help women. They have many volunteers who are medical professionals. They use medically referenced information. That's important. That's the way that they love women well, is to provide that. It's reviewed and honed and stamped at the national level, the national network level by medical professionals. So that's an important thing to defend. But just, this case that's going on is important to let people know about, too, that it's a critically important decision that's going to be made. NIFLA versus Becerra, and it's the California Reproductive Fact Act. The Supreme Court will hear arguments in February and probably render a decision by July. You can watch the news. So,
Moira, thank you. You give us such an important reminder too in talking about your own call to this work. So many women, the pain of their abortion does feel inconsolable. Stephanie Gray was reminding us of that in her talk earlier, just how much pain is out there. And when we talk about this issue, as so many of you know, this isn't about winning a debate. It's about opening doors and meeting people with love, because there's so much pain out there. And earlier I saw, I don't know if they're still in the room, but Sister Virginia Joy and Sister Pia Jude from the Sisters of Life. The Sisters of Life, part of their ministry is to help women who have been hurt by 4 decades of legal abortion, and they have post-abortion healing ministry retreats. That's such an important part of it. Frankly, especially now with our politics such as it is, of course, the president calling in, and people have so many conflicted feelings about him out there. Just being sensitive to the fact that will exacerbate pain, some of the media coverage, and so to just be so tender in our communications. Kelly does such a good job on social media about sort of pointing to beautiful things, the horses in Denver, Colorado, and God's beauty, and in addition to her family, which she is so generous in sharing about as well, and not in a Pollyannish way. We have the power to do that, and in these next days, again, if you can share the pictures of joyful people, it's a balm to a social media that's inundated with noise and anger and hostility. And so if we can be leaven in that, I think that's really important. And there's so much opportunity for sharing that in the next 30 hours or so. So to whatever extent you can do that, do it, because you can be leaven in social media. Tim, can you answer, whether someone's a Knight of Columbus and maybe their council does more pancake breakfasts than ultrasounds, or not? What's some action items? What more can we do as we walk away from here to keep the March for Life going every day, the spirit of love saving lives going in our local communities?
Sure. I think when we think about some of the programs that some of the councils are doing, I think it's these ideas, that example I gave of the council that stands outside the grocery store and collects donations for a pregnancy care center or resource center. I think those are the types, because that's a witness, I think, in a lot of ways as well. People will know that the community is involved in helping people out, because one of the themes that's also come, I think, through some of the other panelists is this idea of being alone. And if people know they're not alone, and people know that there are those out there to help them, and that there are other people out there also helping, because I think sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel that I might be alone in some of the work that I do in my life, and that you may do in yours. Maybe you feel alone as well. But to know, especially when we come here, that we're not alone, and that we're doing things together, and that the people we're trying to help aren't alone, I think is very important for them as well. And perhaps maybe that for the Knights in the room, for those who know councils, and one of the things that we can do, and I think that we are doing in many communities, is to bring that spirit back, that spirit of the March for Life back to where they are, and also being a part of marches maybe in your local communities as well, in cities and state capitals, and provincial capitals for our friends from Canada. Where things can be done there to kind of bring that spirit that we experience here, we'll experience tomorrow, back home.
And Kelly, in a minute or two, what I found a couple of years ago is, I started talking about adoption a wee bit, and I started realizing, oh my goodness, even a little bit is so much, because as you were saying, you didn't realize that there was an orphan down the block, and so many in your community. So what more can we do walking away from here tomorrow help the orphan situation, to help in the foster care and adoption world?
Well, two things I would say. First is just be willing yourself, and maybe encourage those you know to pray that prayer I talked about and simply ask God, what might he have you do? Because you might be surprised. Not everybody's called to the same thing, obviously. But I do feel like if you read the scripture, God's heart for the orphan is pretty crystal clear and beautiful. And we know that pure religion that God our Father accepts is this, to look after widows and orphans in their distress and keep ourselves from being polluted by the world. So maybe just consider. The second thing I would say is something that probably doesn't come to mind often, but I cannot say strongly enough how essential it is. Be supportive of the foster and adoptive families in your congregations. I need to tell you that parenting kids that come from trauma can sometimes absolutely, unbelievably eat your lunch. There have been days and years where I have been awakened each day thinking, how in the world am I going to get through another day with some of the challenges? And it goes back to what Tim said, what the theme is, that love saves lives, and that if we can do this together, if you could come alongside that person at church who thinks they have to smile and say, yeah, well, everything's really great, when maybe they had a lot of hard times with their kids, maybe they had violent outbursts in their homes, maybe their kids are struggling with addiction, maybe who knows what. But just know that and be there for them. And really practical things that I feel like the Catholic community does better than anyone in the whole wide world, bringing meals and saying, can I drive you somewhere? Could I bring you something? Could I shop for you today? Those kinds of things actually can help save the lives of adoptive families and the former orphans who are now home forever, because love really does save lives. Thanks.
Thank you. I can't tell you what an honor it is to be up here with you. Thank you for what you've talked about today. Thank you for what you do. It's an honor to be in a room with all of you. Thank you for being here. I just want to share, National Review Institute has a table, and we're not selling these. These are for you for free, so it's not a crass advertisement. We put these together. It's just a reader of some articles over the years, over the 6 decades of National Review, on pro-life issues, including adoption and foster care. And we put it together because I know that there are so many young people who are here who don't necessarily know all of the history of the pro-life movement. And this gives you a little bit of a window in. And so please go ahead and take one on our table in the expo hall. Thank you again for being here. Enjoy your time here. May it be blessed and you get home safely. Thank you again for your time. Thank you to the panelists.